My name is Gary Templeton. Welcome to our panel. And we have a wonderful blue ribbon panel. One way or another, these are experts, and I have a lot of high regard for them. They will speak in this order. It will be first Aaron French. Aaron French, in my opinion, is the he's the #1 expert in the world in social networking sites because he has created his own site. He does the programming, and that website it's actually an app called Sociable, and he will tell you all about it. He knows it inside and out. He's created a firm around this technology as well. And then Ben Pace will talk. He is the Chief Financial Officer at C-Spire, and he's been there 18 years. Is that right? Yeah. C-Spire is a substantial wireless telecommunications company, and so he speaks from a great deal of experience in evaluating technologies and creating business value out of them. And then there is Kai Larsen. Kai Larsen has written a book and has it in process to be published next year on automated machine learning. And on the far end in the white shirt, Kai Larsen. And then we have Stacie Petter. Everybody knows Stacie Petter for her work on formative and reflective constructs. We've all read that paper. And Stacie has done a lot of other wonderful things. And she's going to provide an academic perspective here. So we have a nice blend of practitioners and academics, and I think it's an exciting topic. And it's my topic, the one that I try to focus on, and I hope that you like the topic more after we're done with this presentation. And I hope our technology works. This thing. Okay, we got it. I didn't click it in the right spot, I guess. So, just to overview a little bit, we're going to assert that information technology firms create value through a wide range of strategies, and it's either services or hardware. And if it's digitally based, and it's a company that focuses on creating value through that technology, and we know a lot of these substantial companies such as Amazon and Facebook and Microsoft, and we know that these companies create a great deal of value, not only for their shareholders, but also as other companies, substantial companies, use their product. So in that way, they also co-create value. Okay, it's working now. So one thing that's kind of, for me as a researcher in this area, that I'm thankful to be able to share with you the sample frame of IT firms. I've cut out 22 industries that you can see are organized by hardware, telecommunications, trades, and services. And yes, I did this subjectively, but you can see that in the 3,000s, organized by the 3,000s are hardware, 4,000s are telecommunications, and 5,000s are trades, and the 7,000s are services. And you can see from the sample sizes that you can actually cut out nice sample size and get nice statistical power out of this. And I do a lot of research in this area. There are a lot of topics that are what I would consider low-lying fruit. And we're simply, as a discipline, we're not investigating this. And this is the purpose of our panel. We all also know, if you read the popular press, there are many, many articles written about IT firms, substantial IT firms, Amazon, for example. You know, essentially Amazon can do no wrong right now. If they touch something, if they start selling something, those companies will also start to pick up appreciation in the market. Their prices will go up. Amazon is kind of like a silver bullet at this point in time. This is just one story because, according to Wikipedia, the top 7 companies in the world are IT firms. The recent news is that Apple Corporation reached over $1 trillion. And this is something that's kind of inconceivable to us, but these are very substantial companies. And so I think this shows that this topic is significant. So one thing about IT firms is they there is in the literature descriptions of how they create strategies to create value, or they have strategies to create values. For example, Salesforce is an online company. They use, of course, the cloud, and companies Salesforce. And another example is Alphabet. We also create value through mergers and acquisitions. Alphabet has purchased 218 companies since 2001, so that's a very important strategy of theirs. SAS is another organization, and their strategy, of course, is data analytics. Jim Goodnight spoke yesterday. And also investing in R&D. That's another strategy that has emerged among these IT firms. And of course, Apple is prominent for their creation. Tim Cook, a year or two ago, came out, he was a new CEO, and he said, I know that product innovation is how we create value at Apple, and their stock price just went up. I don't know if you remember that story. But he acknowledged that R&D was how they did things and how they created value, and the market appreciated their stock for that reason. So to give a couple of examples of how focusing on IT firms may be surprising to us as researchers, I looked at Nintendo and EA Sports. If you're familiar, if you do gaming, if you have children who do gaming, I think we've all played with Nintendo at some point in time. I looked at how popular it was for us to study Nintendo, and I found one article, and it's actually two articles that were regarding the business value of Nintendo. One is in the Journal of Business Forecasting, the other one is the Journal of Business Strategy. Notice that these are not IS-related journals. So our field is not really touching Nintendo, at least. And I also looked at EA Sports, and I didn't find anything on the business value of EA Sports. And that's okay, except these two firms are very interesting. You look at Nintendo and EA Sports, and you think, well, they're similar companies. They're not interesting. They're gaming companies. So what? Well, did you know that Nintendo creates about 95% of their revenue through hardware sales? If you keep up with Nintendo, it's those gaming boxes where they make 95% of their revenue. EA Sports is 100% software. So one is really a software company and the other one is really a hardware company. Right? We may not know that by just thinking of them, and it takes further inspection. In this example, it shows that IT firms, whether they seem similar, like Twitter and Facebook, social networking sites, they're actually very different. And the way they create value is very different. And researchers should be interested in this, I would think. And we should be trying to help IT firms. Even though they're so incredibly wealthy, there are family businesses that are IT firms also that are not, don't have $1 trillion in capitalization. So it's a significant topic. I think it's right for us to investigate, and we're going to talk more about these kinds of interesting questions as we talk more to some other academics. Aaron French, Creative Sociable. Go ahead.
I like to keep throwing out the participant-oriented thing to my name, but I do want to state first that I am a researcher and academic first that's heavily involved in industry and practitioner-oriented things as well. And I've created a social networking app that's called Sociable, and I'll talk a little bit more about that. Now, I've been doing research. Where's your clicker? Still it? Yeah. I've been doing research on social media since 2007. Social networking, and back in 2007, 2008, 2009, every time I submit a paper, I'm getting journals saying, we don't do social networking research. And then suddenly by 2010, 2011, everybody's doing social networking research. So we had a huge boom in the work that's being done. But one of the interesting things about social networking to me whenever I look at it is it's following the growth curve of what e-commerce did in the 90s. And everybody knows about the dot-com bust. And I'm not saying social networking is going to bust. It's not going to go away. But currently, the environment of social networking is focused on advertising as a revenue model. And advertising can be problematic, because it's not consistent. And we'll see some of the advertising landscapes of how this could affect social networking as well. But it's basically disrupted every market, every industry that exists today, social networking has. You see hashtags, you see like us on Facebook, everything, connect to our customers. A lot of customer service is going away, go to our Facebook page. People are using this for connecting to companies, disseminating information, getting out there, and most of all, as a primary advertising channel. When we look at the top 10 websites that are visited, 3 of those are social networking websites. But everything's going mobile. So whenever we look at the mobile environment, actually the top 9 most downloaded apps, on Google Play and iTunes are social networking apps. And so this is where the customers are going. Everything is becoming social, connecting people, connecting objects, connecting things, and so forth. And so it's a very powerful tool we're using. Whenever we look at the advertising channels, this is where the biggest problem is going to come in from a social networking perspective. In the 1990s, you had your advertising dollars spent on 4 different mediums: TV, radio, print, display. And then the 2000s, because of commercialization of the internet in the 1990s and the growth of e-commerce, everything started going towards blogs, websites, search engines, and so forth. And that was one of the issues with e-commerce at the time, is people weren't purchasing products. They were making majority of their money from advertising. Companies advertising each other, because in the 90s, people didn't use credit cards as much. People had trust issues purchasing online and so forth. And we had the dot-com bust. And really what that did is it took companies that were relying on advertising to survive, and it got rid of them out of the market. And companies like Amazon and other companies that were actually creating a proper business model, they thrived, grew, and created e-commerce to what we have today. Now, whenever we look at advertising channels today, like, I couldn't imagine being somebody in marketing now trying to determine how do we advertise and reach our customers, because it's so dispersed, between all of the online channels, even media for TV. You got Hulu, Netflix, Amazon Prime, cable television. There's so many different advertising channels. Those marketing dollars are being spread out through all of this. So whenever we look at social networking, they're fighting to get a share of these marketing dollars. And Facebook has done a great job because of their targeted ads. They can narrow down specifically. I want to target a 21-year-old African-American college student who lives in the South and likes pizza. I mean, we can get very detailed advertising. But even when you target that specifically, is it effective? And that's some of the things that companies are finding out. It's not working as well. One of the companies I worked with back in 2009 is called Louisville Mojo. It was one of the biggest regional social networking sites in America, and they had over 1 million active users at any one given time, based solely in the city of Louisville, which is my hometown. And they were thriving. They were doing great until the recession of 2008 and 2009 came. A lot of their advertising partners pulled out. They didn't have the advertising revenues. They couldn't support the company, and they went out of business because they didn't have those advertising dollars. So that was a big problem for them at the time. We all know what's happened with the Cambridge Analytica scandal and Facebook, and just a few weeks ago, Facebook lost, like $1 billion in stock price just off of a comment that was made. I mean, the value is so volatile, with this market, and without a proper revenue model beyond just advertising alone, it's going to be a difficult market to be sustainable, especially for smaller and mid-sized networks. Procter & Gamble, they cut $200 million in digital ads this year. And that's significant, taking the money out. And because of issues that Facebook has had, we see other companies pulling their ads, such as Mozilla, Sonos, Pep Boys, SpaceX, Tesla, Commerce Bank from Germany. A lot of these companies are pulling their Facebook ads because they're not seeing the return to the value that they're expecting to receive. And so if we're cutting these advertising dollars, what's that going to do to the company that relies only on advertising as a revenue model? And so that's why I've taken a lot of the research I've done over the past 10 years and trying to look at how can we disrupt the social networking industry, which has disrupted all the other industries in the world. And the way we do that is by finding new ways to provide value within the social networking realm. And that's kind of what the app that I'm working on is doing. It's looking at creating a privacy-based social networking app, and by removing the need for the advertisement. That's one of the reasons we get the fake news and we get all of these stories on Facebook, because they need people to post and pay for ads, and they're not caring whether it's real news, fake news, or so forth. They just need the money. And they want to connect everybody as much as they can so they can disseminate those advertisements. But if you take those advertisements out, you don't have the need to push all this content to the users. You can create a private network where users can connect to their close friends, share information with just the people they care about, and not worry about their privacy being sold or information getting fired from a job because something they said, on the platform. And that's kind of where I'm at now. Users remain anonymous until you've connected. If I'm not connected to you, I don't see your profile, I know nothing about you, I can't find you unless you allow me to find you. So it's focused on the strong ties connections. whenever I get to an advertising strategy, it's going to focus on a pull advertising strategy rather than push. To where you go and you like a Starbucks page, and then you can now pull the advertisements, get coupons, and so forth. Which this focuses on more customer retention rather than the acquisition of new customers. Which anybody who's taking a marketing class knows it's cheaper to retain a customer than it is to attract a new one. And so that's kind of how the advertising strategy is going to be focused on here, and where Starbucks only pays for the people that like their page. And so they don't pay to have an ad sent to 1,000 people and get one customer. They pay to have an ad that's seen by 1,000 people that want to see that ad and create that customer loyalty and keep those customers to increase their revenue within the circle of people that want to use their company. So the revenue model is going to be based eventually on the full advertising strategy, but focus more on digital products. Where people can purchase products, things to use on the app, and make money from an alternative way rather than just advertising alone. So currently, I launched this company 2 years ago, had some issues with the programming firm that I was using, and so I fired them, started over, and I'm developing it myself from scratch, adding a lot more functionality than what was originally there. I'm about 95% of the way through developing the app, hoping to launch this year, and then start doing a lot more research with it as well. It just creates a lot of opportunities we don't get in the academic field because it's hard to access the data, and that's one thing that I will have the ability to do with this. And so whenever we look at social networking, the next digital disruptions that we're going to see, from blockchain, existing technology, virtual reality, telecommunications, data management, these technologies are going to disrupt social networking, financial industry, law, health, and so forth. Now, if you think about blockchain, it meshes very nicely with social networking because it's a peer-to-peer network. And so we can create these peer-to-peer networks for basically doing anything in the world we need to do. There's a company called Decentraland. It's a virtual reality company that's trying to connect people in a virtual world on blockchain and sharing everything through these digital connections. So it's kind of like Second Life in the virtual world using blockchain as peer-to-peer rather than going through a third-party intermediary, like Linda Labs, what they're currently doing. And so there's a lot of opportunities. In terms of data management, how do we manage data? Instead of managing data in a centralized or distributed database, we can do it across a network, with blockchain where people are sharing the data. And when you need information, you go out and find it. It's there, readily available, shared, and easy to use. And then when we apply virtual reality on top of it, you don't just look up to somebody have a chair. You can see a visualization of what the chair looks like, all the design specifications, and you add commerce on top of that. So, there's so many opportunities because of these new disruptive technologies that are coming. And social networking is going to be at the core of this because it's not just people connecting together. With IoT, we're connecting to devices, devices are connecting to devices, and we're going to have this full mesh network where everything is eventually going to be integrated. And these are the technologies that are going to lead the way. Pass it over to Ben and let him give his perspective.
And 120. Good afternoon. Thanks for inviting me to participate in this panel and with some esteemed folks. And I'm going to do my best here. I am not from the academic world. I'm from the practitioner world. I help run a company in Mississippi called Ceasefire. We have been in business for about 30 years. Started out actually 50 years ago as a local telephone company. Our owners did, and they caught the wireless buzz, the cellular buzz back in '88, bought some wireless licenses, and then that's really how Ceasefire started and grew, and now we are a pretty sizable company in Mississippi. We're dwarfed by the companies that have been mentioned here, obviously, like most companies are. But we have moved our business from wireless, which is what we grew up on. We call ourselves a diversified technology company these days because we have wireless infrastructure, we have fiber infrastructure, we deliver IT services and cloud services to businesses. We are trying our best to innovate where we can and how we can to provide value to our customers because at the end of the day, that's who pays the bills. But just a little bit about us, we're a private company, so you don't probably haven't, if you're not from this area or Mississippi, you probably haven't heard of us. But we are the, due to default, I would say, we're the fifth largest wireless, or sixth largest wireless carrier in North America. We're the largest privately owned wireless carrier in North America, or in the United States. Now, some of that's because everybody else got bought. Everybody else became AT&T or Verizon, but you know, we're still sixth, you know. So, but we have just under 1 million customer wireless subscribers. Just like, you know, we offer the same wireless service that AT&T, Verizon, Sprint, T-Mobile offer. So we have been doing that a long time. Have seen a lot of change in that part of the industry. Back in 2000, we started building fiber, and that is really, we have about 8,000 miles of fiber today, primarily in Mississippi. But that is really an enabling technology for a lot of companies. A lot of technology if you can have a fiber connection, that makes a huge difference on bandwidth and ability to do things. We like to help our customers and enable them to do what they need to do to get their business done. And that's really how we look at the world. It's what services, what products can we offer that our customers need and want to be successful in their business, and how do we deliver it in an extreme customer experience that makes them not have to call us. You know, we talk about, you hit a little bit on social media and how companies are trying to get their customers to use social media to interact with them. We're doing that. You know, we are doing that. We're trying to do that. We try to do that in the customer service area. We try to create how-tos and blogs and things like that for our customers so that they can use those instead of having to pick up the phone and try to track down a rep, which in our case we believe highly in customer service. So if you do call us, we do answer the phone with a live person, and we have to take care of your problem as quickly as we can. But at the same time, the best customer service is no customer service, so that the customer doesn't have any problems. So that's really how we try to design our products. That's how we try to design everything that we deliver to the customers, so that they don't have to call us because they're not having any issues. You know, in this topic of disruptive technology, you know, we have tried over the years numerous things. Being in wireless, the only way you can survive when you're not named AT&T or Verizon is if you're competitive with them. You have to innovate just the same time they're innovating. You can't necessarily be on the leading edge a lot of times, but you have to be a fast follower if you're going to stay alive in this business, because you cannot offer a lesser product and have customers. No customer, you know, people like to say and have said for years, well, you're in Mississippi, you know, they're not as advanced as, you know, New York City or wherever. And well, that's just absolutely false. I mean, the customers in Mississippi want to do the same things that the folks in New York City want to do. The farmers in Mississippi want to be able to use technology to make their farm more productive, and so that they can make more money. You know, most tractors these days, they're not driven by people. They may have somebody sitting in them, but they're driven by computers, and they need a good wireless network and infrastructure so that works. Mississippi's a big farming state, big agricultural state. A lot of that goes on. They're monitoring catfish ponds. They're doing all the things that need to be done with our technology, and we've worked with them and enabled that for those companies. We've also tried things that have been great failures, because we were either too early or not big enough. You know, we tried the advertising model back when it first started coming out. You know, we had ways we thought we could sell advertising on different platforms, and we just weren't big enough. We couldn't get enough eyes and get enough people that wanted to do it and wanted to pay us enough money to make it worthwhile. So we tried, we shuttered that piece of the business and you know, moved on. We utilize a lot of the targeted marketing through these things, though. Our marketing group spends a lot of time, because the key to marketing these days is getting your message in front of the right person at the right time. You got to get it in front of the decision maker. It's not just a broadcast, you know. TV just broadcasts your message and just over and over, and it's really brand building is what TV does. When you're really trying to sell something, you've got to hit somebody when they're looking, what they're looking for, and that you've got to hit the decision maker. So if we advertise to a 13-year-old, it doesn't do us a whole lot of good. We need to get to the mom and the dad. Or if we're advertising to, you know, somebody that works at a company but is not a decision maker for the company, we're missing the mark. So we do a lot of work with different ways to advertise, how we target market, and that's a critical part of what we do and how we've changed and evolved our strategy on how we reach people with our message, because that's important. I mean, we used to just, I like to say, show up and throw up. So, blast out the message, blast out the message. And, we gotta hit a few people when we do that, and that's just not effective anymore. So, we've changed our focus and our technology, to try to do that more effectively, and hit the markets that we need to hit. And one of the things Gary wanted me to talk about is how we evaluate technology. And we do a lot of, our product folks come up with all sorts of things, all sorts of ideas. And so what we do is we have, from a financial perspective, and that's my background. I probably should have told you that. I'm an accountant, a finance guy. Been doing that for my whole career. Started out in public accounting, worked for a bank that was headquartered in Jackson for about 14 years in the finance area, more than the accounting area, and then moved to C-Spire and have been at C-Spire for 18 years, all in more of the management, accounting, and finance piece. So I've forever been evaluating, why should we as a company do this? Can we make money doing this? Does that make sense? And so we do that as products get dreamed up by our product team. We run it through a pro forma analysis. We make a lot of assumptions. Sometimes our assumptions are good, sometimes they're terrible. Sometimes we just miss it completely. But we track that. And as we track it, if our assumptions were that bad, we'll pull the plug on that product and move to something else. Because we just don't have, every company has, and I put Apple in the same boat, every company has so many resources that they can devote to a new product or a new effort. And you've got to, if you launch one that's not working, you've got to move on to something else. You've got to quit that one and move on. And you see that through the Googles, the Facebooks, the Apples of the world. They'll put something out there. If it doesn't work, then they'll slowly kind of move that off to the side and quit developing that. And we do the same thing. Now ours are more products related to businesses or our consumers. How do we deliver something that makes it more sticky? Because in our world, we're trying to get a customer and then we're trying to keep that customer. That's important. As Aaron said, it's a lot less costly to keep a customer than it is to go and acquire a new one. So our goal is, how do we get that customer relationship to where they want to stay and use C-Spire as their service provider, whether it's a business, whether it's a consumer, whoever we're dealing with. How do we make that relationship such that they want to stay with us? Because C-Spire, you may say, how'd you come up with that name? Well, C-Spire stands for Customer Inspired. So C is for Customer, Spire is part of Inspired, so Customer Inspired is where C-Spire comes from. And so we make all decisions. We have a guy, this little stick guy, I should have given it to Gary to put on the slide, but I didn't. And we have this little aluminum stick guy. It used to be we'd get in a room for a meeting, and on the whiteboard we draw a little stick guy, on the board, and we said that's the customer. As we talk about a product, as we talk about a decision, let's keep the customer in mind, make sure he has a seat at the table. Well, our marketing folks decided to make somebody that makes aluminum stick men a lot of money, so we have them all over the building now, stuck on the wall, instead of the stick guy that we drew on the whiteboard. But it's all about, we have to make decisions to give our customers something that they're willing to pay for. Because if you don't do that, at the end of the day, you're not going to stay in business. And like I said, we've been in business 30 years at C-Spire and 50 years in total as started as a local telephone company. But it's all because we're able to meet the needs of our customers and give them something that they're willing to pay for. And again, we have fairly loyal customers. Our churn rates are pretty low. And it's because we constantly deliver good value for the price that they're willing to pay. So anyway, but that's a short spiel, and I'll do a whole lot better if you ask me questions. So I think we're going to get to that at some point, versus me coming up with a prepared remark. So I don't know who's next, but
Larsen's up.
I'll turn it over to them.
What was the direction? Is it right? There you go.
Hi, I'm Kai. I'm an associate professor over at CU Boulder. Today I want to talk to you a little bit about how to get relationships with primarily technology startups, because that's something I have a bit of experience with. And honestly, it's really hard. Boulder is a hotbed for startups in the problem you get into as a researcher is, what's your value, right? So there's one piece of that, which is we supply the students, right? But for technology startups, we don't supply the computer science students, which is what they really generally want. We supply business students or IS students that are useful in a slightly later stage of the startup process, right? So how can you actually go in there and bring some value as a faculty member? Because that's often what you need to do before they will actually let you do research on them or work with them on something significant. So I'll share a little bit about this automated machine learning thing, which I've been focusing on for a few years now. And some of you may have some experience in machine learning, and some of you may even be very good. I published a couple of papers on machine learning. But honestly, working with especially one company in industry has been very, very humbling. And you sort of get to the point where you start wondering, what is my value to this company? So let me talk a little bit about how we sort of dealt with that. And to do that, I have to tell you a short story about what automated machine learning is. Do you remember when your parents took you out to the car to teach you how to drive? How they went inside of the car and opened up the hood on the car and took you out and showed you the engine? How they took you through how the gas sort of explodes and drives pistons, and there's oil that goes through and all of that. And 6 months later, you were ready to drive the car? No, probably not, right? That's not quite how we learn to drive a car. However, this is how machine learning experts learn to be machine learning experts, right? So, whereas generally speaking, to drive a car, what we do is that we're told to adjust the mirrors. We're told to put our foot on the brake and turn the engine after putting on our seatbelt. And suddenly, we're asked to let go of that brake, and suddenly the dang thing moves forward. And the whole task for you now is to make sure it doesn't go off the road or hit another car. So for machine learning experts, the problem, of course, becomes they have to understand the relationship between the tires and how you implement this thing, and Docker, and all kinds of things that you may not know. And suddenly there's a new algorithm, and it's like an electric car, and you have to relearn everything. It's absolutely crazy what's going on. This is a roadmap for you to become a full-fledged machine learning expert. Let's just focus on the matrices and linear algebra, hash functions, binary trees, relational algebra, inner-outer cross, data joins. We probably know that the database side of this we may be comfortable with. OLAP, sharding. I don't even know what sharding is. Anyone here know what sharding is?
Shorting?
Sharding.
Sorting?
No sharding? I'm taking that as a no. Multidimensional data modeling, right? ETL, who knows what ETL means? I bet that several of you know, extract, transform, load, right? JSON, NoSQL, that's a huge one, right? So going back again, it becomes almost impossible to imagine that you will ever get to the point where you know fundamental statistics, programming, machine learning, text mining, NLP, visualization, data munging, data ingestion, and so on, and plus all the toolboxes that include parts of this. So that's where I started out. I've taught machine learning for about 15 years now, and I would take my students and get them to the point where in one semester they could actually compete in Kaggle international data mining competitions, right? I felt pretty proud of that. And then I met this automated machine learning company, okay? One of the cases that I was able to find out about for them, there's this company called Data Robot. It's the weirdest, silliest name. But Airbnb started employing their tool, and they had already had a team of data scientists. And they claimed that they were able to do machine learning 10 times faster versus the typical 3-month process to do a project. They were suddenly doing this in days. 5% increase in accuracy. You have to sort of see that when you have a team of top performers. That's huge. That's enormous in terms of accuracy. Netflix gave $1 million to whatever international team could improve their best algorithm by 10%, right? Took way more than a year for any of the hundreds of teams that participated. Google Brain is another company or organization that creates auto ML. They're going in the deep learning direction with this. The reason I heard about this was through maintaining a close relationship to a chief data scientist for the largest data science outfit in Colorado. And he was telling me the story about this new company they had brought in to compete with their 30 data scientists, which on average had 15 years of experience with their data. And this company came in and out of the box outperformed their whole team on their own data. So like, that's kind of weird. And I started reading on them, and it turns out they were hiring the top people on Kaggle competitions. Out of 250,000 people, they would hire the top people. And they had built a solution around so I invited the guy who was a top guy on Kaggle to come to Boulder and give a presentation in a meetup that I'd set up to keep these connections with industry going, a meetup on machine learning. And he came in, shared all his secrets, and I was able to leverage that to get to know the rest of the company. So basically just the background here, their tool, this is just one screen of it. If you use their tool, what you need to know about machine learning is the following. What is cross-validation? That is random sampling of your data. And you have to understand the confusion matrix, true positives, true negatives, type 1, type 2 error. You have distributions based on how well their algorithm does, and you can move that around and it changes the confusion matrix. What I could bring to that was, this is embarrassing, right? I had a quarterly paper in 2016. I say I solved the problem in that paper at about the 15% mark, okay? I had a doctoral student work on that problem for version 2 of this system. 3 months later, we had doubled our performance up to 30%. I got access to their system. I dumped my data in 60% in half an hour. Okay? So is there a guy in IS who can outperform this system? I'd be very impressed if I could meet that person. So Tom Davenport actually gave a presentation last week about the same company. And it turns out I had actually written this in my book in the first version in 2017, but he said it again. It is now easier with these auto ML tools to train a domain expert in machine learning than it is to train a machine learning expert in the domain, whether it be accounting, marketing, whatever. I've been sort of talking a bit about this in the IS context because I think IS should own auto ML. I think we should be using it. And at Colorado, we are actually training, now starting in the fall, every sophomore in the business school in machine learning, okay, in half a semester. Risk modeling, which could take a year, according to a Japanese bank using this, now takes hours. You can run experiments within hours. And this is what Tom Davenport calls a post-algorithmic age. You don't have to know Spark ML. You don't have to know H2O. You don't have to know all the algorithms in scikit-learn. You don't need to know the 5,000 algorithms inside of R. They pick the best ones. They keep running tests and so on. And they throw the best algorithms at whatever problem you have. Now, to me, is simply this. How do you get contacts with people like this, with companies like this? You just have to actually go out there and start meetups. You have to actually provide some value, bring in researchers, give presentations, and it's painful, and you have no idea which of these activities will actually pay off in the end. But sometimes they do, and sometimes you then get relationships that can help you do the kind of research that Gary is known for. So that's, I think, about it from me, and I'll take more questions about the sort of general approach for getting more involved with the startups in the tech area.
That's hard to follow. So I'm Stacie from Baylor University, and I actually grew up in IT firms in the sense that in my first jobs out of college, well, like my first job out of college was a job in a college, so I've been in academia a long time, but I actually had a stint before I became a PhD student. I worked for a telecom company right as they were starting to bust, so that was real fun. So I got some experience in telecom, so very familiar with that space. I also worked for then an IT consultancy for a while, a very small IT consultancy, kind of a homegrown shop that went through an acquisition, and so kind of got to see how life works in the IT sector for a while. And so most of my research, when I collect data, I have published some research related to IT firms, but a lot of times I just capitalize on what's available because it can be hard to get access to, especially if you're trying to focus on a specific type of firm. So as I chatted with Gary and we talked as a panel and talked about what some of our goals were. So for this presentation and my part of it, I want to share kind of what my advice would be. Let's say you're getting captivated by some of these ideas of digital disruption among IT firms. How would you get started? How might you go down this path of being able to conduct research in this area if you haven't been doing it before? So here's what I would do if I wanted to go down that road. So I'd start with the low-hanging fruit, right? How do you start? Well, you start with what you know, right? So if you are already an expert or you already have knowledge in certain areas, start with those research areas that are known to you and think about how those areas might be different in the context of an IT firm versus non-IT firms. Now, I think part of that question begs another question, which is what is the difference? What are the lines of an IT firm? Because some of these firms that we talk about today, you could argue, well, are they fully IT firms? Are they hybrid firms? Like, things are so blended because we rely so much on technology for so many of our organizations today. So you might say, well, Amazon, it started out as a retail firm. It happened to be an online-only retail firm, but they were in the retail space. That was who they are. But if you now look at Amazon, where's all their money being made? Amazon Web Services. That's clearly in the IT sector, right? So we have these firms that are kind of this weird mismatch of like who they are and have this weird identity. But maybe now they're IT firms, but they didn't start that way. We also have firms that, again, heavily rely on IT, but are they IT firms? Well, Netflix, they're a content provider, purely now through technology, but they didn't start that way, right? Netflix, I could pick my movies using technology, but it was shipped through the mail. That's how I got my DVDs through Netflix. Right, so we have firms that have kind of spanned these different boundaries, and we have firms like Walmart, who are known for their digital disruption using technology, but they're not an IT firm. Right, so if you're interested in focusing more specifically on IT firms, I think you have to think about within your research area, what makes IT firms different than non-IT firms, right? And find those gaps or those interesting things that might extend theory or help us understand boundary conditions of theory that might be interesting or relevant in areas that you're interested in. Thinking about methods that you might use. You again, stick with things that you know. If you already have certain areas of interest that you're already performing research in, maybe you can use the same methods, but maybe you explore different types of methods that would be more appropriate given an IT firm context. But again, that's part of how you define IT firms and partly how you're distinguishing what's different in this particular context of being an IT firm versus a non-IT firm. There's also new sources of data. So as Gary mentioned, here we have, he showed there's thousands and thousands of firms that are in this space of IT firms if you look at industry segments. And so there's all kinds of archival data that's available about these specific segments that you could investigate. So you might even look for new opportunities to explore this domain through data sources that you can actually get a lot of information about a lot of IT firms and potentially draw conclusions doing research like what Gary does. and looking at specifically industry segments. And then again, as you do this type of research, you get to look for those implications that are specific to IT firms. Even if your results are only generalizable to IT firms, that's a huge portion of a market, right? That's a huge industry segment. So that doesn't necessarily minimize an impact. There's still value in contributing to that particular segment of the industry. So just some examples of how you might pursue research opportunities and finding those low-hanging fruit. I mentioned stick with things that you know, and you might think, well, if we're just focusing on IT firms, maybe it all has to be organizational level research. And no, I tend to not do organizational level research. Most of my research is at an individual level. And so just in kind of thinking through how I might study IT firms, if I was going to focus on that niche, some different things that I've been thinking about. Workforce development is an area I'm interested in. And so recruiting and retention in IT firms is actually fairly different than recruiting and retention in traditional firms or non-IT firms. Because you think about the types of incentives and perks that IT firms often provide. Facebook, for example, is known for providing lunch for their workers. There's actually some problems in San Francisco with this going on right now in terms of providing lunch. Restaurateurs nearby are not happy that lunch is provided on-site as opposed to off-site. But there's just different cultures that we have in IT firms that we don't necessarily see in other firms. There could be some interesting workforce issues explored there. Another issue, Gartner and some other groups have done study after study, and they've asked CEOs what keeps them up at night. It's not having enough workers that understand digital business to have these digital disruptions to transform the industry. And not just within the IT department, but across the entire organization. So understanding how do we get skilled workers ready to do this digital disruption actions, that's another aspect of workforce that you could focus on in an IT firm context. Another area near and dear to my heart is IT project management. So IT projects and technology firms, there's going to be some elements that are going to be similar to non-IT firms, but there might be some elements that are different due to the rapid pace of change, already their familiarity with technology. Maybe there's more opportunity for feature creep that you might not have in non-IT firms based on various aspects of the types of work that they might be doing. There's also this focus on constant disruption in some firms that, particularly in the IT space, creates a strain on projects. You're minimizing the time available. You're trying to get things out faster. If you're trying to get things out faster, you have to either increase the budget or reduce the scope. This is like project management 101. And so usually what we do is we reduce the scope, and part of how we reduce the scope is we cut security measures, right? And we know the dangers of that, and we've seen plenty of evidence of the problems with that in the news. So we have to be careful about how we deal with projects if we're dealing with an organization that's in a disruptive context and that's trying to move quickly to deal with digital disruption. Another aspect might be entrepreneurship. How do we create that entrepreneurial spirit in a company to come up with the ideas to disrupt the firm? Right? We have to generate these ideas and creativity somehow, so looking at creativity or collaboration. Another idea that came to me actually as we were talking, another aspect I'm interested in is social inclusion. And so the fact of, Aaron mentioned earlier how a lot of companies are putting their presence on Facebook, but I'm a non-Facebook user. I don't have a Facebook account. So when a company only has a website on Facebook, or if that's the only way they're trying to reach their customers, they'll never reach me. And I can't participate in a conversation, or I can't participate in that because I choose not to have a Facebook account. And that's my choice. But at the same time, you might be missing out on other opportunities that might be available to reach markets, to reach people, because they choose not to be part of certain platforms. And so there's all types of research ideas that you could take and apply that might be also appropriate to non-IT firms, or could be appropriate to any type of firm, but maybe there's some unique aspects that we could study in an IT firm context. So the last thing I want to share is where might you publish your findings, right? Let's say you do research on IT firms, where can you publish that work? Well, all the mainstream journals, all of our AIS basket journals would be certainly willing to publish research on IT firms. I've published an article in the quarterly related to that's based on an IT firm, so that's never an issue. Also think about non-traditional options or non-basket options. A shameless plug for the Database and Advances in Information Systems. I'm co-editor-in-chief of that particular journal. And if you're not familiar with it, it is not a database journal. It is the database for the advances in information systems. It's a repository for what we can learn about information systems. If you want to learn more, come see me. My colleague Tom Stafford is in a booth downstairs, and you're getting coffee during the break. Go chat him up. He'd love to talk to you and share with you more about our journal. But we would certainly publish research in this area, and we do publish research in this area. So there are plenty of friendly outlets. There's also plenty of opportunity to connect back with those practitioners, with people like Ben, or connecting with folks that Kai has been interacting with. And so we can do that with various outlets. And we often think, well, we have our scholarly outlets because that's what counts, right? So maybe an MIS Quarterly Executive, maybe we think about Sloan Management Review. But if you want to make an impact, you might also think about blogs. You might think about news outlets. You might think about other, Wired. You might think of other ways to get your message out there to reach organizations and practitioners about the type of work that you're doing, especially if you want to get access to more companies in order to help you do more research about IT firms. So,
Thank you. So to conclude, we heard from the panelists. We found from Aaron that his IT firm is very different from Facebook, and his model is going to be different going forward for funding his company. And Ben emphasized the utilization of customer feedback and focusing on his customers and co-creating value with his customers. And these examples show that IT firms take advantage of digital disruption. For a less innovative company, disruption may be a bad thing, but for IT firms, they capitalize on these opportunities, and that should be exciting to us. Our companies are different from the others. So these IT firms are very unique. Nursing, in the nursing research literature, they study nurses. Nurses are a part of their sample. We can study IT firms. They have journals focusing on nurses as their sample. Same thing in entrepreneurship and family business, kind of related to IT firms. But there are multiple, as you can see, many journals dedicated to focusing on that sample frame of companies. We could do that as well. Financial institutions are the subject of study in finance. We don't have any journals on IT firms. I think we possibly should. I know people shudder at the idea of having a new journal, but this is something that's certainly missing from our opportunities. Are there opportunities to do IT firms research? As Stacie mentioned, there are databases. We have Bloomberg terminals. How many people have access to Bloomberg terminals in your institution? Bloomberg terminals, in my opinion, is one of the greatest instructional innovations in the last decade. It's phenomenal. 3,000 sources of news, piles of data. Did you know that you can create a dashboard for firm performance and studying IT firms using Excel inside of Bloomberg terminals? That's just, there's Bloomberg maps. There's so many capabilities in Bloomberg terminals. If you would like to talk to me about it after this, I'll talk to you about Bloomberg terminals. Aside from that, there's piles of data on IT firms in that resource. And of course, Words. How many people have access to the Words database or CompuStat? Words is a family of databases. And Andrew Miller here is my graduate assistant, and we're working in this space. We've just barely scratched the surface of what's available in the Words databases. So we know that there's a wide open space for IT firms research. Just to let you know, as it stands, it appears to me, I looked in our top journals. I looked for IT firms or information technology firms in our top journals, and I found barely anything. I found 6 articles out of almost 50,000 in our top journals. And when you expand the search, I found 16 articles on IT firms and over 3 million articles. So we're really, think about one of the earlier slides on, the top 7 companies in the world are IT firms. And we're barely really researching this topic. And we also have, we know, piles of data on this subject. So it compelled me to try to put this panel together. I think we're done. We're going to go to questions now for our panelists. Anybody has a question? Yes, sir, Jim.
I have a question for Ben, and I'll preface it by saying I was a cellular South customer
Okay.
about 20 years ago when I was much younger in Mississippi. But I'm curious, so you mentioned in the renaming it, Ceasefire Customer Inspired. I was curious, customer focus, how do you get the voice of your customer, of the crowd, and what are some examples of ways that you see their voice and kind of use their feedback?
Okay.
towards the
Why don't I
position?
stand up here so you can hear me? So the question is, how do we get customer feedback? And we listen, one of the things we have is retail stores. In the wireless business, you have retail stores. We have about 60 of those. So we do a lot of listening as customers call in, come into the store and complain, and we understand what's going on, get a lot of feedback that way. We do a lot of focus groups. We have a lot of, as we're testing, especially new marketing ideas or new things, products, we'll do a focus group and try to get true feedback from the customers. We ask them to participate in social media and things like that. We get a lot of feedback that way. We have a social media team like most companies do. They're watching social media all the time. So you can bet if we have an outage that we get a lot of complaints. But we also get, why don't you do, people have really have embraced social media as a way to interact with companies, whether it's Ceasefire or whether it's Delta Airlines or whoever it is. And so we'll get, why don't you do this? Have you thought about this? Just push to us from our customer base. And so those things we look at, and there's a weekly write-up of things that come through social media for us to, can we do this? Is that something we can do? A lot of them there's reasons we don't, or reasons we can't, but there are others that get us thinking, and as we start thinking, we start trying to figure out, well, that's a problem that somebody's experienced, and how widespread could that problem be, or that issue that customer's having, and how do we fix that? So we listen a lot. We try to listen, probably don't listen enough. I'll be first to say that, but that is something that we try to do as part of just interacting with customers on a regular basis. In the enterprise space, the business space, our people are in front of those customers all the time listening for what problems do you have, how can we help you, have you thought about this, have you thought about that? So as we're sitting across from the CIO, and he's saying, here's what's going on, and we're saying, well, here's some products that we have, and then we start working together with them, bringing our engineers in to try to help that CIO solve whatever problem he's having. Is that the new technology you hadn't considered? Is that new hardware you hadn't considered? What is that problem, and how do we solve that for that customer? So in the enterprise space, it's actually a little easier because we're sitting in front of the customers all the time. I mean, we're having that one-to-one feedback. In the consumer space, it is harder, but that's where social media helps a little bit, and just going out and trying to listen to the customer. I mean, if you want to hear from the customer, most of the time they'll tell you. They'll tell you what. Most of the time they'll tell you what they don't like. They're not real good at telling you what they like unless you continue to prompt them. But we get both. I mean, we have some raving fans out there, and that's what's helped us be successful, is by being customer inspired and listening to the customer as we develop things and as we develop strategies. So.
Yes, sir.
I just wondered about the tool that you mentioned that you use that equity and/or commodity derivative industry.
Sir, could you tell us your name and affiliation?
Oh, my name's Mahesh or Michael Rasingani,
Okay,
and I'm with Texas Women's University.
okay, thank you. And,
Yeah, I'll come up. So is the question whether it's being used in the derivatives area or?
Derivatives area is and/or say for ETFs, index fund, there seems to be a lot of, even within the SME, the subject matter experts, they seem to get it wrong.
Right.
And when I spoke to Fidelity, for instance, just as a real example, they say we happen to be a technology company with financial services in that. So as technology, if the tool can help enhance their returns, they would have an edge. I'm just curious if this has been done specifically with derivatives.
So working with this company has allowed me to, interact with some of their customers, right? And I don't know all the details about what they do. What I have noticed, however, is that this tool started out just being really good at cross-sectional kind of and predictive stuff. But then you take a big data set, train a model, and then you apply that model to data the model hasn't seen, and you get an outcome as to how good it is. And but I've seen them move so very, very fast. And right now, last week, they released their first longitudinal data models. So now suddenly they have that as well, right? So I haven't had a chance to get a sense of how good that is compared to industry standard. But what I'm seeing some of the companies that I've been observing doing is that they're using it to figure out finally, for the first time, how good is their data science group really? And the answer is, generally speaking, not as good as something that you just opened up out of a box. And so then their job is, you can't fire your data scientist because there's still one more piece I didn't mention. I said cross-validation, you have to understand that. You have to understand the confusion matrix. But really where it all comes down to is problem formulation. Okay? Formulate the right problem, get the right data for that problem, and dump it in. But that's still a fairly big part of this puzzle, and that's actually somewhere where IS is really good. We know how to deal with data, right? So again, I'm sorry, it's sort of a partial answer at best because I haven't had a chance to evaluate the kind of tools that they're now providing for that area that you're looking at. But I suspect they have banking companies, banks and insurance companies, and that sort of area is one of their strong points, I understand. I don't know, thank you.
Any other questions? And I should have said the first questioner is Jim Love. I didn't ask him to identify himself.
Are we done today? So I appreciate everybody coming here. I would love to talk to you. You can come and approach any of the panelists, and I'm sure they would talk to you. I thought they did a wonderful job. They were really amazing. I appreciate that.